So it's President's Day, isn't it? So you'll be seeing this 2 days from now, but it is President's Day, Monday, February 20th. And so we have a little something to dedicate to President's Day. And took the old Scrabble board out. I won't show it to you because it's buried under some stuff. But took the Scrabble letters and spelled out Donald Trump and Barack Obama. And then somehow or other we took those letters and jumbled them around. And what did we get out of the letters in Donald Trump and Barack Obama? We got a proud black man, and we got Mad Bart. Scrabble boards don't lie, take my word for it. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. We're going to bring together two somewhat disparate subjects together to discuss the moral imperative of environmentalism. That's our overarching discussion today. But with me I've got Jen Siskind, who's an environmentalist, and we've got Marcel Lugo, who is our in-house religious expert. He is a minister, and Jen is an environmentalist, and we're going to talk about the moral imperative of environmentalism. Jen, start us off with fracking, an ever-popular subject.
It is. Here in Connecticut, it's been a very hot topic. We've had a state law pass that mandates that DEEP will write regulations on whether to bring fracking waste into Connecticut.
That's Department of Environmental Protection?
It is, yes, but we're concerned that they're not really protecting our environment with this intention to bring fracking waste into Connecticut. It is highly toxic. It has many chemicals, ones that are known to be carcinogenic, to cause organ damage, to cause endocrine disruption, neurological disorders, developmental delays, embryo toxicity. And these are just the chemicals that we know about because some of them are kept as trade secrets by the oil and gas industry. And it also, the waste that comes out of the wells is also contaminated with toxins that are buried in the ground. And we're talking about some very hazardous materials: arsenic, lead, other heavy metals, hexavalent chromium. Most people had never heard of hexavalent chromium before the movie Aaron Brockovich.
And I thought I'd heard about. Okay.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Interesting movie, and that's okay. Go ahead, continue.
And then one of the other concerns is radioactive material that's coming out of the ground that's contaminating this waste. We're talking about radium-226 and 228 is very commonly found in fracking waste, and radium-226 has a half-life of 1,600 years. So if you're spilling this, leaking it, mishandling it, not treating it properly, and then discharging it at treatment facilities into sewer systems or into waterways, we're talking about a radioactive contamination that's going to stay for a very long time.
Continue and take us through the nuts and bolts of it. And Marcel will have some things to add to it, and we'll continue, both of you.
Right. Well, fracking is occurring closest to us in Pennsylvania. Fracking is a nickname that refers to unconventional high-volume hydrofracking. It's high volume because of the way the wells are being drilled. They have figured out a way to drill the wells a mile or two deep and then turn the drill bit horizontally and travel up to a mile or two horizontally through the shale. And because they are drilling such far distances, they have to use a very high volume of chemical solution that is injected into the ground. It's chemicals and water and sand, and it doesn't all stay in the ground. Unfortunately, a lot of it returns back up to the surface, and then it can become it's waste that needs to be disposed of. And unfortunately, there are efforts to try to bring this waste into Connecticut. There are 3 hazardous waste treatment plants that are in Connecticut that are privately owned and for-profit facilities. And the industry has been lobbying pretty hardly to our state legislators to allow this waste to be brought and treated here in Connecticut. And it also seems that Connecticut officials and legislators may also be interested in bringing it in. And We are trying our hardest to try to keep it out. A state law passed 2 years ago. Initially it was going to be a moratorium, but instead, or initially it was going to be a ban, but instead of a ban passing, the language was compromised and a moratorium was passed instead.
So it's a temporary ban rather
It
than
is.
permanent
It
ban.
is. It's temporary in that DEEP must write these regulations and turn them in for review as early as this coming summer. So it's a hot topic because people in Connecticut do not want this waste brought into the state. They don't want it coming to their communities. Over the past 2 years, there have been 10 towns in Connecticut that have passed waste bans through local ordinance. It's been a movement of politically active people that are either taking the initiative themselves to apply a legal petition to their town and force a vote of the town residents to whether they want to pass this ordinance or not. In some cases, it's been an outpouring of support from town residents and pressuring the Board of Selectmen or the town council or the representative town meeting members to pass this.
Marcel, what town do you live in?
Waterbury, Connecticut.
Okay, so probably, do you know if there's anything on the table in Marcel's town to bring them into the?
I don't have anybody organized in Waterbury, but Waterbury is an interesting case because I mentioned radium-226 is one of the contaminants that's in this waste. And there were clock factories in Waterbury where they used radium, which can glow in the dark at very high concentrations. And this was, decades and decades ago. And women were employed by these clock factories to paint the dials of watches with radium so that they would glow bright green so people could see them in the dark. And there was a clock factory in Waterbury, there was one in New Britain, and I think another one out in eastern Connecticut. And the state of Connecticut has spent considerable time over the past few years to decontaminate these old clock factory sites. Millions of dollars have been spent trying to remove radium from these facilities. And unfortunately, people were already working in these factories that had been turned over into artist booths or small business lofts, that sort of thing. So it's kind of ironic that in Waterbury we've had people die from radium poisoning, women that worked in these factories decades ago, and now the state is interested in potentially bringing this waste that can be contaminated with radium back in.
A little closer to home, of course, in Danbury, the Danbury area. Danbury was noted for its hatting industry. And so because of the lead that's used to process felt for hats, we know that a lot of folks were poisoned badly and died because of exposure to lead. But keep in mind that relative to lead, compared to lead, we're talking radioactive waste here, which is, lead doesn't have a half-life. Once you get rid of it, it's gone. These things you mentioned about a half-life of about 1,600 years. So a pound of it becomes a half a pound 1,600 years later.
Well, it's
And
interesting.
it's still got to go another 1,600 years to get to a quarter of a pound.
Yeah, it takes about 4,000 years for radium to no longer be radioactive. And as it decays, it turns into other radioactive progeny, including a radioactive form of lead, lead-210, and polonium. And the end result after radium does finally decay is lead. So, even after it's no longer radioactive, you're leaving a very harmful contaminated legacy behind. Wherever this is spilled or leaked, or where accidents happen on roadways with tanker trucks carrying this, where it's not adequately treated and is discharged into waterways or into sewage systems. We don't know what the regulations will be yet that DEEP is planning to write. We do know that this waste is deemed hazardous. We're the only state in the nation that defines it as hazardous waste, which means that the raw waste will first have to go to a hazardous waste treatment facility. And as I mentioned, there's 3 in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, Meriden, and Bristol. And But after they treat this waste, they're going to have a very concentrated sludge material that they're going to have to get rid of, most likely ship it back out of the state again. But then there's also going to be a lot of leftover treated water, or it's called effluent. And there are about 12 facilities in Connecticut that receive non-domestic transported waste, or effluent. So we're concerned that the regulations might allow this partially treated, potentially still contaminated effluent to be sent out to many other towns across Connecticut. And I have a map here that you can show that lists some of those locations. Where you see the red on the map, those are the 10 towns that have already passed ordinances banning waste on a local level. And the yellow is areas where towns are actively working on this, whether it's a variety of activity. It could be local grassroots community groups who have contacted Food and Water Watch asking for assistance. It could be commissions that are already reviewing it. Could be town councils that are planning to bring it up for a vote next month. There is a varying level of activity in over 20 towns.
To the religious side of this, is your church, what is being discussed about various environmental issues? What's the talk in church amongst parishioners?
Church talks about many different subjects. The main subject is, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. Me personally, I don't know much about this subject. It's all actually a bunch of new information to me that I'm learning, and the Bible teaches to prove all things. So that's something I will have to do my research about to be able to be more fluent of what I speak about in this. But concerning the world, we are supposed to take care of it and subdue it. So, the Bible teaches, don't be afraid of what man can do to the body, but rather fear what God can do to the soul and body in hell. So, that's more where my focus is at. But, it's something I will be, studying and looking more into, because, it is harmful, as you say. So.
And it is a learning process that congregants and various faith leaders have been going through over the years. Here in Connecticut, we have the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, which has been very active on environmental issues. And that's a coalition of faith communities around the state. I know that the United Church of Christ, or the Congregational Church, has passed a resolution in their synod that urges congregates to speak out to state and federal leaders on the hazards and help educate them on the hazards of fracking. And we have congregational churches that have asked me to come in and give presentations. We've had congregants that are passing around petitions during their coffee hours. The IREJN has a annual environmental summit every fall, and they've been dealing with gas waste and fracking, and there's a coalition of Catholic sisters who will be having a conference at St. Joseph's on Saturday, April 1st. And they'll be dealing with how to protect our water in Connecticut, and fracking waste is one of the big issues for that.
So the faith community is a big part of what the process is. They carry a lot of weight. There are a lot of folks. Connecticut's generally a very religious state, and it's an opportunity for them to get involved, and it sounds like they really are.
And we've had various churches come forward in the communities that have been active to pass these ordinances. We've had members from the Congregational Church, the Catholic Church, the Unitarian Universalist faith community. So it really is fully integrated into the community, where they want to care for creation is the title that most churches refer to. Food and Water Watch helped put together a wonderful video called Faith Against Fracking, and any of your listeners are encouraged to just Google Faith Against Fracking and see the terrific interviews that have been given by members of various faith communities.
Yeah. Marcelo alluded just to the notion that we're stewards of the land, and that's our task that God has put in front of us to carry out, to be stewards of the land and take care of this majestic planet that God has given us. Mm-hmm. It's up to us. Mm-hmm.
Also, another thing too, you know what? We don't really worry too much about the land because we believe that God is gonna create a new heaven and a new earth, mm-hmm. wherein dwelleth righteousness. So, you know, we focus more on the souls and try to get souls saved, so that way they can be in the new earth and the new, you know, new heaven and new earth. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, where I focus. And all you have to do is, you know, accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, and you can have eternal life through His name.
Okay. Janet, continue. Do you have another?
Sure. What I can do is show you this page, which indicates how hazardous the chemicals that are in fracking waste are to the human body. This is an infographic that was put together by Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. It deals with a study that was done in 2011. And what you're seeing referred to in blue is chemicals that are soluble in water, mm-hmm. and what you're seeing in red is chemicals that are volatile, or they can vaporize and travel through the air. So chemicals in fracking waste can impact you whether you're breathing them in or whether you're eating contaminated food or drinking contaminated water, or even recreational fishing or any kind of water recreation. If there's contaminated sediment, you can be impacted by chemicals and radioactivity as well. According to studies that Yale has done, we are now aware of more than 1,000 chemicals that can be used on fracking jobs. They're not all used at one time. We guess that dozens are used at a time, maybe 100, maybe more. We're not 100% sure because there is this proprietary trade secret that the industry is allowed to keep.
Are they allowed to keep these? I understand that, you know, if you have a copyright on something, you need to protect that copyright. But in a situation like this, does it make sense to withhold potentially harmful things from public?
Well, unfortunately, keeping these trade secrets means that the information is not readily available when there's an accident on the roadway and first responders, firefighters, police, people living in the area, motorists are impacted by spills that occur on the roadways. There are material safety data sheets that can be pulled up, but often the MSDSs don't include all the proprietary information. You know, there's a pretty famous case about 10 years ago in Colorado where a worker on a frack site was spilled with some fracking chemicals, and he came into the ER feeling nauseous and vomiting and severe headache, and the nurse that helped him take off his clothes and then bagged them in a plastic bag within a day of that incident had gone into multiple organ failure and was really on death's door. And the company that was doing the drilling and was responsible for these chemicals never provided to her doctors what chemicals were used. And fortunately, they were able to save her life. It took about a week to get her out of critical condition, and you know, she was having kidney failure and liver failure and heart failure. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And this is what we don't want happening here in Connecticut. We don't want this waste coming in. We don't want it spilling on our roadways. We don't want it discharged into the sewage systems of the towns where these hazardous waste treatment facilities are. Unfortunately, these 3 privately owned facilities do not have a very good track record on handling the chemicals that they're currently dealing with.
What kind of chemicals do they handle?
Anything that you can think of as hazardous waste, whether it's solvents or chemicals from manufacturing or plastics or metalwork, or it is a hazardous waste treatment facility, but Rivers Alliance has looked at the EPA eco records and found that all 3 facilities, the best performing facility has been non-compliant for 9 of the past 12 quarters, which is almost all of the past 3 years. And the worst performing facility, which is in Bridgeport, has been non-compliant in every quarter for the past 12 quarters. And both Bridgeport and I believe Meriden have had very significant violations that have resulted in action taken by the EPA and modest fines, in my opinion, for the damage that they're doing when they discharge inadequately treated chemicals. So we would love to get faith communities in the Waterbury area active in this and helping to educate their congregations. I go out and give presentations. Some of the pages that you've seen today are basically printouts from a slide presentation that I've been giving around Connecticut for the past 3 years. So anywhere that we can make connections to the community and get people active on this.
And how can the community take action once they learn about and conclude that there's some serious problems at hand here?
Well, communities can pass a local ordinance themselves. If you live in a very small town that doesn't have a town charter, there are regulations in the state statutes that allow you to petition your town. And there's a certain legal format that you have to follow, and we can help get people a copy of this legal petition. A gentleman named Douglas Larry in Wyndham has been providing that assistance. He's a member of the Green Party in Wyndham.
And probably knows Ralph Nader, who I think also lives in Wyndham.
So that's one method that towns can take, that residents in towns can take. If you don't have a charter, you really only need 50 signatures that are validated in order to call for a town meeting and vote on an ordinance. You would probably want a larger number of people to support and come out for it, but that's the minimum standard. Other ways is to approach your town councils, your commissions, your Conservation Commission, your Energy Task Force. We've had both Conservation Commissions and Clean Energy Task Forces in towns across Connecticut champion this and help move it forward. We've had both Republican minority leaders in the town of Windsor and Democratic minority leaders in the town of Brantford help move this forward and convince their colleagues on their town leadership to pass this for their residents.
So those are 2 towns that have actually taken that initiative and gone ahead and passed local ordinances banning. Now, is that banning waste being treated in their towns or waste passing through their towns?
Unfortunately, you can't ban transportation. Federal interstate commerce clauses prevent that. You cannot stop a truck at the border of your town. But you can make it illegal to apply any waste to any real roadway or real property in town. So that makes it illegal for a truck to be leaking as it's traveling. And it also makes it illegal for a truck to cause a spillage, and therefore towns can hold the trucking company responsible if an accident does occur while it's traveling through.
So there's some good leverage.
Yeah, so the language is pretty comprehensive. It's no treatment at wastewater treatment facilities, no disposal of waste at any solid waste or landfills, no application on real roads or real property, no handling, no sale, no acquisition. It covers all bases, which is nice.
I know a good friend of the show, Henry Pietras, has been working locally, Brookfield specifically, but also we're working in Danbury and Bethel and other towns around the area, other towns in the Comcast area, which includes Ridgefield. To get these initiated, to get these ordinances, these local ordinances initiated, talked about, and acted upon to continue that process. So whether 100 69 towns in Connecticut?
There are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we're attacking this one town at a time on a local level,
On a local
while we attack it on a state level also.
Right. And on a state level, there was recently a bill introduced to, actually 4 bills introduced to the Environment Committee. And last week, the Environment Committee voted to draft a bill that would remove the authority for DEEP to be able to write regulations,
Okay.
which would either extend the moratorium or create a permanent ban. So anybody who has a senator or state representative on the Environment Committee in Hartford at the LOB is encouraged to contact them. Locally here, residents of Brookfield and Milford and other towns going up into Litchfield County, New Milford and Brookfield and other towns going up into Litchfield County, you can contact Senator Craig Minor. He's one of the co-chairs of the Environment Committee, and constituents can contact their own representatives directly. And when a public hearing is called in the Environment Committee, everybody can contact the Environment Committee.
And of course, you see a lot of town hall meetings. They've become very popular all over the country. But I was at a town hall meeting in Bethel a couple days ago with our state representative, Will Duff, who seemed to be pretty interested and pretty avid about dealing with environmental issues and renewable energy issues also. So these guys are ready to listen. So these guys and gals that are in the legislature are ready to listen. So speak up. Their ears are open, so speak to them directly and prompt them to do what's right, just, and moral. We're going to come back and we're going to do a second show and do a little bit more of a comparative religion discussion with our guest, Marcel Lugo. But how are we doing for time? 30 seconds, that's good enough. Okay, this has been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson, Jen Siskind, and Marcel Lugo, my guests, and a good discussion. And we'll be back tomorrow morning, tomorrow at noon 30 for our Thursday show. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your evening.